and thank you to Harris and Claire for setting a really great sort of scene of education which I could identify with myself personally, having gone through university, school and schooling my own children, and sort of coming across all these subject matters but from an experiential angle. So today I'm talking about mothers, minority mothers, and I've really got two roles. One is as a freelance researcher and writer, so I'm not based in academia, and as an adult tutor. I've worked in family learning for a good 10 years. So I'm coming from that angle. I'm going to talk about some research I did about mothers and what their views are. And my second role is just me, myself. I am a minority mother, and so this is kind of a mix of the personal and professional put together. And the reason I started this, before I move on, was because I went back to university about 20 years after I qualified in teaching to do a master's in social justice in education. And some of the theories there was like a homecoming, critical race theory, intersectionality, things that I hadn't heard of before but really made sense to my experience and made it easier for me sort of frame where I've come from and what my children are going through. At the same time, when I was doing research on parent and school engagement, because that was something I was particularly focused on, I found there was a lack of anything on the bookshelves to do with my type of experience as a mother. There were often racialised, sort of studies, and that's important, and that I could relate to certain parts of that too. But then I knew I was having a very different experience, and I wanted to sort of delve in further. So when I finished my master's, I headed off to do independent research. So it's not funded. What I did have was a very good network of colleagues, teachers, very proactive head teachers, friends who were willing to act as helpful gatekeepers. And I had a proposal, a book proposal, because I'm a writer, so I think in terms of books rather than other output. And I had an editor, Gillian Klein from Trentham, who had complete faith in me doing the research and kind of championed it under her publishing, which is now part of UCL IOE's press. So that's what I set out with, not armed with that much. And the context that I used was what you're already familiar with, but the Equalities Act, the public sector duty, and the need for schools to be places which are inclusive institutions, to sort of state the obvious, and ensure that students with protected characteristics are not discriminated against. So that was one angle. And then because I was looking at the minority mothers that I knew I could identify with, that I understood their journey, I focused on the Muslim population by going back to census figures and looking at some of the plain facts. I know it's quite old now, but the MCB, the Muslim Council of Britain, had actually done a study back in 2015, and they extrapolated quite a lot from that, but from the census. But the two things that are relevant to us today is that the Muslim population in the UK is relatively young, so 33% are under the age of 15, and of all school-going children, 8.1% children are Muslim kids. So their experience and their parents and the engagement, all of that was relevant to understanding what we can do to improve theirs and teachers' experiences, both angles. And the third area I was coming from was the parent-school partnership discourse. And sort of the overall context really was to look at better outcomes for students across the board. That's not just Muslim students, but who they're studying with, their school as a whole community. But those were sort of my starting points. Right. And the other angle, which I've alluded to already, was a personal one. I was a governor at two different primary schools, a parent governor, family learning tutor, which took me to a lot of schools in deprived areas when we were running courses both at secondary and primary schools. And so by default, I was always in conversation with minority parents who would be recruited to come to those courses. that gave me a lot of narratives that I knew were there, but were not being heard in terms of academia. I also had quite a funny experience, well not funny, but an experience through being a governor where a lot of things were off the record. So I would have head teachers phoning me up at home saying, "Oh, can you just come in and help with that family?" Like to communicate with them or to help with them. Or I'd have parents stopping me in supermarkets saying, "I've got to see the head teacher, I've got to see that teacher, can you help me, can you come with me, or can you help me fill out forms?" So there was a lot of different ways that this parent-school interaction was going on in my life with 3 kids that I was putting through the education system at the time. The theoretical approach I came from, because I was looking for material, like where do we place mothers? I found the maternal scholarship really spoke to me, and particularly the matricentric feminist approach, which does a lot of things, but seeks to unmask motherhood to illuminate an understanding and an appreciation of the diversity and complexity of maternal experiences, as well as the commonalities. So a lot of the things that I found when, as I'll discuss, and I researched the mothers, are common issues for a lot of migrant parents or minority parents. It wasn't just them. But then there were some complex issues that they grappled with because of their identity, because of who they were. So those sort of position where I was coming from when I set out to do this research. Going back to the 2011 census, I used that to find my main participants, as in the largest groups of Muslim communities, and I went across 5 locations in England, 3 in the southeast, 1 in the Midlands and 1 up north. The 2 in the southeast were 2 London council estates with schools on them, and 1 more rural shire. And then the other 2, the Midlands and the location up north, were quite sort of heavily populated with different ethnicities of Muslim population there. I did 29 interviews with 24 participants who were part of focus groups, about 53 mums altogether. And stuck to sort of as I was saying, the largest groups are Somali, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, and smaller mix of Indian, Arab and English mums. Now the education status of the mothers varied. I had mums with some very, very little literacy, right up to postgraduate mums doing PhD, well one or 2 doing PhDs. I had about 3 deputy head teachers as participants, and I had not chosen them because my gatekeepers were very proactive and good at just getting the word out there and getting mums into this focus group. But I ended up actually having quite a few mothers who worked in schools at different levels, from midday supervisors to LSEs to teachers. And that gave, as you'll see a bit later, quite an interesting perspective on what they were hearing as members of staff in terms of institutional racism and marginalisation. So over half of the mums were in paid work, some of them in full-time, some part-time. It's just over half actually. And the rest who were not in paid work were quite busy combining caring roles, especially for elderly parents, and a lot of voluntary sector roles in supplementary schooling, whether that was language, religion, whatever it was, they were quite involved. Some of them involved in sporty or supplementary clubs, some doing short courses and some on longer term study. So I took a grounded theory approach where I put the questions out there, quite broad ones, to see exactly what they would come up with rather than having really sort of narrow questions. So just gives the flavour of the first one of identity, of who were they. Who they're always spoken for, but how did they actually position themselves? Because their interest at the end was to see how their children fare and what would help their kids. So it was important for me to know and to share how they themselves define themselves, and whether it's as a person, as a type of mother, how would they respond to that kind of question. The second was, what does education mean to them? Because there are some tropes out there which they used in the past of Asian parents that come to parents' evening, or some sort of negative stereotypes. So I wanted to get from them what education actually meant to them, how they chose their children's school, because that feeds into a lot of the school choice discourse. What was their relationship with the school, and I deliberately left that open. Doesn't, without putting anything else to interpreting it in any particular way. They could take that whichever way they wanted. And then I questioned whether they participated in school life, and did they face any challenges at all. And those questions were mostly, they were used in all the focus groups, and then the interviews, I just let them talk and take the conversation where they wanted it to go. So what came about was the strongest theme was about their identity, about themselves. And there's so much sort of data that I can't read to obviously in 20 minutes, but it is in the book. A fifth of my moms used the labels such as, I'm just a working mum, or they took the ethnic sort of view of I'm a British Pakistani mother, or I'm a Bangladeshi mother, or I'm an English mother, and they read it simplistically as they wanted to and put it across like that. The rest, however, the vast majority traced their journey to having a faith-related identity. And that was where that intersection I find is often missing when we're talking about intersectional identities, is that it tends to leave out that faith element which the participants themselves bring to the fore, not me. Because I didn't even call it Muslim Mothers. I called it the book that in the end, because they had self-identified that way. I just said this about mums and school. That was how it was presented to them. So part of why they, in summary, part of why they were caught, sort of relating themselves to a faith identity, it came from a whole spectrum, from feeling marginalised and realising that they were marginalised because of their faith, right, and then adopting that Muslim mother label, right to arriving at this identity because of a personal spiritual journey. So there's a whole spectrum of reasons why they sort of came and converged to this label. But I'm going to focus on a little bit of data from the Somali mothers, because they're actually the most forthright in identifying themselves. Now just give a moment to sort of read that. And I'll tell you a bit about Hibak. So Hibak, who's a mother of 4, made it very clear, without any hesitation, that for her to be a good citizen, to be a good mother, good woman, is to be a Muslim mum, and that was her identity. And she said that actually was what she was bringing her kids up to be as well. And to her, she said that's the most important. And it was something that was reinforced by a lot of the other parents, because this was from a focus group. We have Hodan, who's a mother of 4 as well, who said we have to show who we are because of the wrong ideas. We can do everything, say everything, we're Muslim, we respect other religions. And she continued to talk about the media, which I'm going to highlight in a moment. But while they were having this discussion, Amal, who's a mother of 3, said, yes, like the media, all this propaganda, especially about women, I feel very proud as a mother. So there's a lot, if we unpacked it, about sort of gender, race and religion there, and the media, because they really felt that they were at this resistance all the time and having to push back from the headlines that they would see or hear in the morning. And there were a couple of community-based women who were very active from the Somali community, who actually reinforced that and said their work in schools was quite difficult because they would do a lot of the bridge building, and then in the morning there'd be the metro with another headline there in the staff room, and it felt to them as though all their work was, just demolished, because what can they do? And they would have to have those conversations again and again and again. But that was just from 3 mothers there. 5 minutes. Oh no. Okay, so the state of media reporting, I'm going to have to whiz through really quickly. There are a lot of studies being done, well not a lot, there are quite a few studies being done, and I'm not going to stop to read that one then. But this one is a more recent one that the Muslim Council of Britain's Centre for Media Monitoring has brought out. And they did an analysis of the papers, and you can see the stats there on the negative publications, the negative headlines, and there's actually a lot more from Lancaster University, where they analysed 200,000 news articles and found the majority were very negative. But I'm going to skip to the overview of the themes that emerged. I have what I called as a typology, the authenticating mothers' identities in the middle, because it seemed to touch on all the other areas that they brought up. So they had a really holistic view of education. They didn't feel that their faith or their identity diminished the importance of education, it actually raised it. When they discussed school choice, there were quite a lot of the mothers had to talk about how they were seen, how they felt they were received when they went to visit schools, and they judged schools according to whether they felt accepted or not before they put their children in. That was some mothers, not all had the choice or the luxury to choose. Participation, the governing body was something that the more educated mums who are involved in school brought up, in terms of feeling that they were on the margins, no matter how much they put in, the data's there, how they felt they were there really to tick the box that we have an ethnic minority in the governing body. And they can do the samosa order, or they can, do something ethnic, and then the job's done. The one that I was going to focus on in probably 2 minutes, which is not enough, is a securitisation fears. I did not mention PVE, prevent, none of that in any of my questions. They brought it up right across the board, and they struggled a lot because they felt it from two angles. One, as mothers, they were afraid about their kids being wrongly accused of drawing a rucksack on the back of a man for a poster, and that might go right up to the authorities, as in a 6-year-old. And from the other end, those of my moms who were working in schools heard some pretty, I'd say bordering illegal kind of staff training, where the language used to characterise the Muslim kids, as in, quote from the book, oh, they all just get abused in mosques when they go after school. That kind of language coming from a head teacher to all staff training is also difficult for the teachers who are Muslim mothers, because they're saying, we are then members in that school. What do we do about this structural new type? They almost lack the language for how do you describe this, because it's not strictly racism, what is it? It's this thing, but they deal with this thing. Some of the other areas they talked about a lot was relationships between parents, and there's a lot about playground politics. I have one chapter nearly about playground politics. I know my time's up, is it? Another minute?
2 minutes.
2 minutes? Oh, okay. Yeah. Obviously, I can't do justice to what they brought up in this, but it's there in the book. The governor roles, the relationships, and the pariah status really is what a lot of them brought up. That they felt often, say for example in governing body roles, that they'd turn up to everything, and then the socials would be organised, which would deliberately make it very difficult for them. There'd be 5 restaurants they could go to, but it must be the pub that's chosen. With the other people on the governing body knowing full well that they can't just go in the pub, that some of those parents just won't do that. And so there were these kind of little barriers that they had to face and overcome. I am going to also say that there was a lot of positives, because in some schools where there are family liaison officers or family sort of partnership officers, there was a lot of good stuff going on and really positive things. So I just did a quick overview of what goes right, and that's when there's dialogue between the school and the supplementary provision. Again, that's really helpful. When there's a proactive family liaison officer with the language of the minority parents, that produces wonders, literally. You get very engaged parents who are actually investing in the school, giving their time to after-school clubs, because there was that link in between. When the events are genuinely inclusive and a bit more broader than just sort of food or music. When community and family cultural capitals are recognised and valued. That's where I saw schools and parents' experiences, and by default the staff and the children all benefiting. And finally, when parents have the agency to organise clubs tailored to their community's needs, which actually is linked to the family liaison officer's position, those schools also really thrived because they kind of overcame a lot of barriers by being, using their agency and providing things rather than being on the back foot. So in the end, as I end, I can't do Amal's story, which is amazing, but if I talk to any of you, I'll tell you about one particular mum. The net result of me doing that research in around 2016 was the book that came out 2017 for practitioners, for researchers, and it now sits on the shelves of the IOE where I couldn't find it before. So thanks for listening.